My fellow citizens, in these unprecedented times, it's more important than ever that we stand together and support one another. Our deepest condolences go to those who have lost loved ones due to the coronavirus, and our prayers are with those who find themselves facing enormous hardship in this lockdown crisis. Together we will overcome this and rebuild our country. Together we will find a way forward. South Africa tuned in last night in the hope that our president would show us the way forward. But an hour later, he had barely said anything. He told us his government had often got it wrong these past 7 weeks, which is true. He told us that South Africans have played their part and made enormous sacrifices, which we know. But when it came to the part we were waiting for, the urgent opening of our economy so that our people can get back to work, South Africans were left bitterly disappointed. What President Ramaphosa announced last night was simply not enough. Remaining in hard lockdown until at least the end of May, and possibly even longer, is not good enough. Remaining imprisoned by a night curfew enforced by armed soldiers is not good enough. Remaining subjected to a slew of irrational, petty regulations that do nothing but kill business and turn decent people into criminals is not good enough. And having all of these decisions passed down by some secretive subgroup of the executive with no clearly defined authority is certainly not good enough. South Africa tuned in last night to hear one thing only, that the job of the lockdown is done now, and now we need to get our country back to work. Instead, we got a long rambling justification for an extended lockdown that has torn our economy to pieces, and a vague announcement that this might be eased in 2 weeks' time. Not good enough. If the purpose of the lockdown was to ramp up our healthcare capacity and expand our testing program, and we're told by the President that we have done this, then the question is, why keep the lockdown in place for yet another 2 weeks? In the President's own words, he said that there is clear evidence that the lockdown has allowed us to achieve our objective of delaying the spread of COVID-19 and avoiding a massive surge in infections that would have overwhelmed our healthcare system. So, if this objective has been achieved, if even the President's own experts agree that the hard lockdown must end, why do we remain in lockdown today? Why are we deliberately destroying thousands of businesses and millions of jobs? Why are we causing all the suffering for our citizens if it is no longer necessary? I will tell you why. It's because of a lack of courage. Going into lockdown was the easy part. Everyone was doing it. The world was panicking and governments were spurred into swift action. But coming out of lockdown is the hard bit. This is what requires smart strategy analysis and skills, and it also requires a lot of leadership and bravery. People are going to see infections spike, and they're going to want to find someone to blame. It'll take a courageous leader to know this, and yet to still do the right thing. Hiding from the virus was the easy part. Dealing with the virus is the hard part. But every sacrifice we've made these past 7 weeks has been for this very goal, to prepare us to face the virus. We cannot let fear paralyze us a moment longer. We cannot remain trapped by fear of the spread of infection. The lockdown was never going to stop infections. It was always going to delay this. We cannot remain trapped by fear of a rising curve, because the curve will rise, and it will rise by a lot. We must know this, and we must accept it, and we must trust that the curve will rise by less than if we had no lockdown at all. We cannot remain trapped by fear of the duration of COVID-19, because this illness could be with us for the next 2 years. We must learn to manage it and to live with it. We have to end the hard national lockdown, and we have to do it now. We have run out of any road we might have had. In fact, we reached that point a month ago when the initial 3 weeks set aside for a hard lockdown came to an end. 3 weeks was just about all our crippled economy could bear. When the President announced that the 3 weeks would then become 5 weeks, we spoke out against this. We warned that an extension to the hard lockdown would be an economic disaster, and we were right. Those extra 2 weeks of level 5, followed by another 2 weeks of level 4, have already baked into our economy a depression that's going to take a generation to recover from. We called on the President to end the hard lockdown a month ago, and he has had every opportunity to act since then. Yet last night, he told us, just stay put for another 2 weeks. We don't have another 2 weeks. That is why the DA has now decided to take action, because somebody has to, and the President won't. One by one, we will fight and we will overturn every decision and every regulation that is either irrational or immoral until we have done what the President could not do: end the hard lockdown. You'll know that we have already instructed our lawyers to challenge the discriminatory use of COVID emergency relief. It isn't right for government to exclude citizens from this relief based on their or the employer's race and any other arbitrary criteria. We've also petitioned the IMF to make any funds obtained from them by the South African government conditional on non-racial use or any other arbitrary criteria. And today, I want to set out our next rounds in this fight. Today, our lawyers will be filing papers in the High Court challenging the rationality of 3 separate lockdown-related issues: the night curfew, the ban on e-commerce, and the restriction on exercise hours. It is our opinion, and it is shared by many South Africans, that all 3 of these decisions should be immediately reversed, as there are no rational justifications for a military-enforced curfew, a restriction on e-commerce business, and a limited 3-hour window for exercise. But it also has to be said that these irrational decisions are taken by the National Command Council because they are acting without any checks and balances. The state of disaster we are currently under, governed by the Disaster Management Act, has 0 provision for parliamentary oversight, which means that the secretive National Command Council actually answers to no one. Now consider that not even a state of emergency, which is a further step up from the state of disaster, has such sweeping powers with no parliamentary oversight. There is no logical reason for this, and it surely could not have been the intention of the authors of the Disaster Management Act. And so tomorrow, our lawyers will be filing court papers challenging the constitutionality aspect of the Disaster Management Act. Because unless the Act meets constitutional muster, the decisions taken by the National Command Council under this Act are not valid. This is an extremely important case because it speaks to one of the most crucial principles in our democracy, the separation of powers. We have an executive branch of government, which is the Cabinet, and a separate legislative branch, Parliament, for a very good reason. But right now, because of the lack of oversight, the executive is effectively doing the job of writing our laws and regulations as they please, bypassing all the debate, amendment, and opposition that would have happened in Parliament. We have to fight this, because from here our democracy finds itself on a very slippery slope. What we will be asking the court to do is apply the same oversight provisions to the state of disaster as to the state of emergency, because without this oversight, petty authoritarians hopped up on power are being allowed to run amok. That's when you see pensions and toddlers harassed and arrested for simply walking on a beach. That's when you see e-commerce banned, not because it's a health threat, but because it is apparently unfair towards non-e-commerce businesses. That's when you see cigarettes, alcohol, and hot food arbitrarily banned. And that's when you see laughable regulations about what kind of t-shirt or shoes you can buy and how you should wear them. None of these things make any difference in delaying the spread of the virus. They're all just a massive overreach by the kind of ministers who should be nowhere near such power. If we want to prevent this kind of dictatorial madness, then we have to stop it at source. And this means removing this authority and power through proper oversight. Right now, these legal challenges of ours are what stands in the way of a slide towards a one-party fiefdom where laws and regulations are simply issued by decree. It is in every single South African's interest that we succeed in these endeavors. And so I ask you that you help us to fund this process through a small contribution. Please visit our website, da.org.za, or our Facebook page to see how you can pay your part. then you can also co-sign my letter to the President asking for the hard lockdown to be lifted. We cannot do this on our own. If you were perhaps feeling powerless until now and wondering what you could do to help fight this heavy-handed lockdown, this is it. We need to fight this together, just as we need to face our fear of the virus together. Yes, there is a threat, a very real and scary threat right outside our door, but it's not going to go away. No matter how long we choose to stay on this side of the door, it will still be waiting for us on the other side. So let's put on our masks, wash our hands, and open that door so that we can face the virus with courage, determination, and a whole lot of common sense. Let's replace this destroying hard lockdown that is destroying our country and economy with a proper smart lockdown plan that allows the maximum number of South Africans to return safely to work. Let us allow every business that can operate safely to do so. Let's set out hygiene and distancing protocols for every type of business and every mode of transport. And let's do the same for our schools. Let us make the best possible use of the resources of the state. Instead of locking up soup kitchen workers and atchar sellers, let us rather pour the state's attention into finding people who are at real risk and helping them to isolate. Those with comorbidities such as diabetes and hypertension are vulnerable, and they should remain locked down. Many of them cannot do so where they live, and here the state can play a crucial role. Let's put on the masks, wash our hands, keep some space around us, and then go out there and try and rescue what we can of our economy so that our people can earn a living and provide for their families. The threat posed by the lockdown crisis is so much greater than the threat of the virus that we simply have no choice but to end this hard lockdown now and start to open our economy up. If the President is unable to make this decision, then please help us to make it for him. We are going to beat this virus, South Africa, but it's going to require all of us to stand together, united, challenging silly regulations and fighting for the future. Thank you very much.